So in today's video, I want to walk through the roadmap for 2025 for Bitcoin. We're going to look at where we are currently, but also historically what Q4 delivers in terms of potential returns. We're going to kind of simulate it and what it means in the short term and obviously the long term. And I'm also going to showcase and share my plan for the cycle just to kind of give you an idea of where my head is in terms of potential rotation and potential market top. And if you get value from this, please do smash that like button and let's get into it. Now, where are we in terms of the cycle? Bitcoin is at this crucial level I have been talking about. Now, today is FOMC day. I'm not going to talk specifically about that, and the video isn't leading to that because obviously as this video comes out a couple of hours later, the FOMC will deliver its result, which we are expecting a rate cut. But it's more what Powell will say. I'm thinking more longer term. So this has a bit more life in terms of it, a bit more, less like milk, hopefully. So we are at this situation where we're at a key level. But right now, in my viewpoint, Bitcoin is in a discovery correction, essentially. What does that mean? It basically means we have had an all-time high break, and we've obviously pulled back from it, obviously. And we're kind of a little bit lost in a way in where we are. And the lost element and the lull element could be because of the FOMC. Now, the big caveat to all of this, bear with me, is the fact of one thing and one thing only. The S&P, the Nasdaq, and other big, massive indices are at all-time highs, yet Bitcoin has been somewhat struggling. Why are we lagging? I know, it's interesting, but we have had a couple of corrections over the course of time. Obviously, post-halving was a bit of a deep correction, and it was quite a big one over a period of time. And then we trickled up, right? Obviously, if you're going back and if you've never been in this market for that long enough, you probably have no idea what the fuck I'm on about. But the other element around the corrections that we've had, they've been shorter and shallower. We've obviously had a correction, as I say, halving, big one. We had a one which was roughly around the ETF time, which wasn't too bad, about 20%. And then we've had one now, roughly, you could argue, about 13% from an all-time high. So when we talk about these halvings and these kind of like all-time high breaks in terms of like the past, and let me just go and showcase this in a bit more detail, it's obviously of interest. So obviously the market bottom here, this was essentially that kind of situation around the ETF. Pretty big, right? But not really, realistically, longer speaking. Again, we had this one here in terms of the inauguration. Yeah, went quite low, but not really going to break the bank. And then obviously here. So they are getting shallower and shorter, which is mad in a way, but that's just where we are. And it looks like we are, in somewhat case, I know if you're on mobile, you're probably struggling to see that, we are slowly trickling up. As I've alluded to it, we need to get above here, and this then needs to flip it and become levels of support. And that would indicate that maybe you could argue the correction is done, and where can we go from here? But the bigger time frame is going to give us a bigger picture. And what, as I said before, we are seeing essentially the S&P, the Nasdaq, whatever, doing really, really well. Yet Bitcoin's done nothing. And that is very, very interesting. But yes, we do have certain things and data, and what Mr. Powell will say could be very interesting. I don't think this is priced in, but I have seen it before. With rate cuts, we have had sharp corrections. But that doesn't take away what Q4 can bring us. By the way, if you are interested in a lot more content from myself, another 2+ hours plus live stream and all kinds of good stuff as well to Discord, jump in, Patreon. There's a nice little juicy discount if you use code FREE90. If we're talking about the past, and we're going to simulate this as well in terms of the averages, just to give you an idea, because as much as it is a bit wishy-washy data, Q4 across the board, even in equities, is relatively strong. That's just the reality. So you can see in 2023 how strong it was. Obviously, it was a much smaller market. And again, you could argue certain things have repeated with this. 2017, if you were around in those days, it was absolutely biblical and it was crazy, especially if you're in ICOs. It was crazy. And then you've had 2020 and 2021, where it was just a bit wild, really, when you think 2020 with COVID. And then 2021, we had that October kind of pushback into then this final top, essentially, right? But on average, you can see here very, very clearly, we are getting upside across most of the months. There's a lot more green than red, obviously. And that could be where the retail come back, essentially, only because, well, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, whatever it may be, hit certain prices and it draws people back in, therefore exit liquidity. But we also have to look at the fact that January isn't a bad month neither, even though that is relatively tax season-ish kind of vibes in terms of the US market. So yeah, there's always going to be an interesting area, but we've always been marking out around the 4-year cycle. Is the 4-year cycle going to remain with Bitcoin? What's going to happen next? What about the institutions? What's going to happen there? But yeah, it's interesting talking points. But let's simulate some numbers. So on the screen, 28% at $150,000-ish is the median between October, November, December. So basically, long story short, the median is kind of the middle value of the numbers when you line them all up in order, only because it removes that skewed data that we do get sometimes in November. But we will do the average as well. But I know a lot of people will be like, oh my God, 150,000 is not a lot. But it is because it's 10x from the market low, right, in terms of the cycle. So in terms of like, you could probably argue a conservative estimate, 150,000 could well be the absolute, as I say, the conservative median area where Bitcoin goes. And I know, as I say, some people are like, oh my God, that's a bit shit, isn't it? But the reality is, as I say, that is still a decent chunky number. Let's look at the other scenario. Now, roughly 71% is the average returns over that quarter. And you're probably looking at my chart going, wow, these numbers seem pretty obvious. You've probably seen them before, that's why. But I want to talk about my own analysis in a minute, the extreme version. As I say, if you've seen my analysis, you'll know roughly what I'm going to go with this. But let's talk about the obvious in the room. Let's just copy this up here and make a note of it, because that is going to be the absolute mental case that we do the past, which most people probably won't expect. But we could go even higher than that potentially, who knows? But as I say, you got the medium at the bottom and then you got the average. Cool. What about if you're in between that? Well, you're probably going to look at my analysis and go, well, actually, just put them in the middle. And you're probably right, to be fair. Around $180,000 wouldn't be a bad place to be, $175,000. But to me, that seems mental because I'm a Bitcoin holder. I've been holding Bitcoin for a long time. And my overall gains in Bitcoin has been pretty good over the course of the last couple of years. But for some people, as I know, they will not be very happy. But the question is, and the ultimate question for the roadmap is, what number do we need to be for the likes of the retail to come back into this market and to then flood into, say, altcoins? Because we don't really know yet, because it hasn't happened yet, realistically, in an ideal world, and it's pretty damn crazy. But you can see roughly on average what those numbers could be. You've got 71% of the extreme numbers, right, which is fair enough. Then you've got, as I said, the lows, you've got roughly 28, 29%. And then you've got in the middle, roughly give or take, around the 50% mark. They're only numbers, and I know that. But ultimately, the ones on the right-hand side makes it look more psychologically bigger. Therefore, it might lead more people back into the market. But, as I've just alluded to it, I have always been planning out for these sort of levels. These are extension levels. 3.618 is a very big juicy number. This is where we topped out in the last cycle. Are we going to just go to 156 on here in terms of dollars, which is the 2.618, or we're going to go with this other Fibonacci structure of 157, give or take around those numbers? It's not going to be absolute, of course. But that big grey box, I've been talking about that a lot on my Patreon for a while, and it feels like that kind of area isn't a bad place to be probably looking at some profit taking, essentially. But obviously not financial advice. We couldn't go higher. Bitcoin can be a bit like a child. I've got two of them. They're crazy. And they will want to do what they want to do at whatever given point. But sadly, I'm going to say it. Once Bitcoin clears this resistance, it may only suggest that we get 5 to 8 weeks of upside before this is the final leg and we do top out. Where does a rotation for altcoins happen, so to speak? As I say, what numbers does Ethereum, Solana, whatever need to be to get people interested again? The shitcoin cycle, the meme coins, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's certainly a sticky topic, but more often than not, people don't prepare for these sort of things. Word of advice, have an exit plan somewhere along the lines, something, I don't know, whether it's on the back of a fag packet, I don't care. But you need to understand that if we do get a blow off, it will be the end, essentially. By the way, if you're interested in trading, 20% back on fees, a really good welcome bonus. And yeah, don't get caught up in the emotions of it. But ultimately, if you do not want to be trading altcoins by spot, Probably a good way to do it with futures and then not get yourself blown up essentially. Because people over risk massively with spot in my viewpoint, whereas with futures you can kind of divvy it up a little bit better. So you're probably wondering, what on earth is my plan? Profit taking within those Bitcoin levels are pretty much a must. I am doing a dollar cost average challenge where I do have Link, I do have Solana, I do have Bitcoin, and I do have some runes as well. And that is all on my Patreon, and I will showcase it on this channel every now and again. But more importantly, my plan is to carry on dollar cost averaging there until I think it gets mental. Realistically, I probably will stop with the Bitcoin at some point, but if altcoins carry on chugging, I will keep that going. The thing is, with this roadmap, so to speak, and even on the screen here, with the USD sort of dominance, we have to get low. And if it gets low, existing liquidity is coming to the market. As this gets lower, I will be taking money out because I will be getting a bit twitchy. That's obviously a plan there. I will talk about it a lot more on my Patreon as things happen, obviously in my journal. But those $114,000 to $116,000 levels, we need to get much higher than that for Bitcoin to again run. FOMC is going to be really interesting today. I know you may be watching this later on, but it's more about what Powell will say. What will happen? Will it spook the market? Will it create a downward move to then spook the market into potentially buying at the lows again? And then we will see where we go from here. But as I've alluded to before in previous videos, if you're looking at the total 3/BTC, we are looking pretty much better. But we need to go much higher into these zones up here to get some money, obviously, because otherwise it's just going to be a complete and utter failure. But that's the mini roadmap I've kind of got planned out here. Short corrections, diminishing returns, but still an opportunity to make some money in Q4 and into early 2025, but 2026, sorry, as you see the idea. But it depends on where we go. But let me know in the comments, where do you think Bitcoin or even dominance of Bitcoin will top or drop, so to speak?